Very excited for this Fireside chat. Jocelyn is a managing director of Zetta Venture Partners, a fund that invests in early stage startups focused on the intelligent enterprise. Prior to joining Zetta, Jocelyn was an engineering director at Facebook, where she helped incorporate machine learning into the newsfeed, which is something that most of us have probably used. And before that, she was an early engineer at VMware, where she built core virtualization technology and ultimately established and ran VMware's desktop business unit. Jocelyn serves on the board of Harvey Mudd College, and she is also a visiting lecturer at Stanford University.
I apologize for that.
All right. So Jocelyn, to kick things off, while you were at Facebook, you worked on incorporating machine learning into newsfeed. How did your experience building machine learning technology at a big tech company like Facebook inform how you now think about investing in startups building AI technologies?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that the good and bad news is that Facebook and its brethren FANG companies are really good at what they do, and we definitely had. We were among the first to run into some of the largest problems of scale with data and data infrastructure. So I think what I learned about the tool chain and the sort of challenges and like where we had to really throw bodies at problems to make things scale were kind of an early harbinger of what startups are going to see down the line. So I think that gives me a lot of insight when I'm looking at AI toolchain companies. One thing that was really evident, the other thing Facebook has is lots of scale. Not just it possesses a lot of data, but it possesses the ability to do statistically significant experimentation in real time, all the time, because if you make a change to the newsfeed, you can get a vast amount of data about the results of that experiment very fast. And so I think one of the things that does is it sort of strips away any rationalization or self, just the ability to lie to yourself about what the data is telling you. And so and I think but it does show you that our human intuitions about what a feature is going to accomplish or what features are going to predict what outcomes are really wrong most of the time. And so when you're a startup, I think like one of the biggest challenges you have is that you are in a void of data and in a void of feedback loops. And so you go a very long way just operating on your intuitions and your feelings and your sentiments. And I think what Facebook taught me is that our sentiments about other human behavior is mostly wrong, and so there is no substitute for real world feedback loops, and to just kind of be passionate about beating the drum for doing that as early as possible, even in a startup.
Makes a lot of sense. Real world feedback loops.
Yes.
All right. So moving on to how you think about the trends and investment opportunities in the AI space. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you see as the most exciting trends in the AI space?
Well, we invest broadly into sort of three categories of company, and there are exciting trends in all of them. I mean, AI as an umbrella is just some of the most exciting stuff I've gotten to work on in my career. So I could go on all night about this, but I won't because I'm in between you and cocktails. So first broad bucket is AI enabling, and so this is that tool chain I talked about, the data infrastructure platforms. We are investors in a company called Domino Data Lab that is probably one of the paramount sets of model management platforms, especially used in the Fortune 500 Global 2000 data science teams. So tons of interesting stuff going on in that world around model explainability, around sort of the work, the sort of ineffable work that takes place in between sort of inventing a model to make a prediction or a recommendation and actually running that thing in production as part of a product. So very, very exciting stuff going on the tool chain side because, we've reached that level of maturity as an industry. Everybody's not trying to do things by hand. We're now really trying to do this at sort of commercial production scale. Second, most of the companies we invest in are actually applying AI to solve a problem. And of course, if you're applying AI, most of the time, you are accumulating a data set that is in a context about something. And so we think of our applied AI companies in two sets. One that is gaining a lot of data about a particular business function that occurs in any kind of company. One business function I'm really excited about there is the very traditional business function of IT. I spent many, many years at VMware trying to transform and successfully transforming the data center. And now we have a data center that is way too complicated for real human beings to operate. And so a company I recently invested in that I love a lot is called Opsani, and they use AI to help operate the data center and help performance tuning, help optimize exactly what your cloud infrastructure configuration ought to be for any given workload. And they use deep reinforcement learning to do that, one of the few commercial applications of deep reinforcement learning that I personally am aware of. So super exciting company, and I think the potential for AI to transform the data center very real. Third bucket is we apply AI with a lot of data about a certain industry vertical that we're trying to transform. And so probably the obvious one there that we've been talking about all day here is healthcare. And a company at Zetta that my partner Ash invested in last year called Maya that actually tracks the symptoms and the recovery stages and sort of the whole data exhaust of a patient's life after a cardiac surgery and predicts remission relapse, which is one of the biggest risks for people who have had heart surgery, and remotely monitors and prevents additional relapse. This company is exciting not just because heart health is a huge problem and a huge killer in the United States, but also because one thing that is really tough in healthcare is not just getting the technology right, but actually getting the business model right. And because this one sort of falls into a remote monitoring category rather than a diagnostic or a therapeutic category, we think that it can get some traction while other things are still in the test lab. We think this one can get out into the real world and really help patients sooner. So I would say those are sort of three broad swaths of areas that we're looking hard in, and some examples of companies we think are doing really exciting things.
Got it. So AI that enables other use cases, infrastructure AI, and vertical specific AI, such as Maya for healthcare.
Yes.
Great. All right, so next question. So AI adoption can be limited by the technology itself, but can also be limited by the question of how much decision makers trust the AI and how expensive it is if the AI fails. So today we've seen Kyle and many of the people from AV companies talk about how there's a readiness problem. In healthcare, obviously, if it's not about monitoring, if it's diagnostics, there's like a big risk. So how do you think about balancing these different dimensions when you think about companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think healthcare, which I was just touching on and you raised again, is the really obvious example where, the technology is really maybe much more ready to deliver the goods than the market is to buy it and adopt it and trust and deploy it. And so I think that it is important. When I think about, where companies are going to find success, where the market timing is right, it's just as much about the market being receptive as it is about the technology being ready. And I think that, AI, everybody in this room is a practitioner. We all know AI is not good at giving you a right, wrong answer with 100% confidence. It's not a rule, it's probabilistic. And so it's good for things like recommendations or optimization or, it's classification. Where there's sort of some confidence interval around whatever it is that you arrive at. And so when you think about where that kind of technology was the safest to deploy early on, it was in consumer, it was for personalization. It was things like the Facebook newsfeed or Netflix movie recommendations. Because the whole idea is, well, if Netflix shows you a recommendation for movies and the recommendations are good, then you watch more movies. Netflix shows you more movies, win-win, great. And if the recommendations are not good and I don't watch more movies, well, they're no worse off than if they didn't have a recommendation. So sort of the upside, if the AI is right, is very big, and the downside, if it's wrong, is very low. We thought the same about the Facebook newsfeed, that if we can show you more of the content that appeals to you and you engage more and you interact more with your friends, that has great virtue to not just to you, but to your friends and then also to Facebook. And if we don't, well, it's still better. Probably we can, no matter what, we can do better than showing you stories in a random order, which is what chronological order is. And the future historians will judge whether we were in fact correct that there was little downside to getting the algorithm wrong. But at the time we felt that, and that there was great upside if we got it right, and no worse than the alternative if we were wrong. And then I think as you sort of transition into business use cases, which is where I sit as an investor, and you start working on things that are mission critical to people's jobs and businesses and livelihoods, the first place that we can come to accept AI is really as an assistant to a human being, where these humans are making all the final decisions, but an AI is doing maybe a first draft to make the human more productive. Good example is a Zetta company called Lilt that does machine translation of human languages. And so it might translate from German to Spanish. It all goes to a human translator in the end, but the AI takes the first draft and the human just does corrections. And so that human translator is able to be 7 times more productive than they would be if they were translating everything from scratch. Well, that's a win for everybody, and the output quality is just the same. And so we're not taking too much risk to adopt AI for this kind of augmented human productivity. I would say the next step with AI, and what we're starting to see, is sort of full automation. And this is where we go ahead and let the AI do work that a human being could be doing, like data entry, like extracting, fields out of documents, or reading an MRI for a radiologist. And I think increasingly this kind of technology will start out being used the first way as an augmentation to a human, and as it gets better and better and right more and more often and right more often than the human being, industry by industry will start to trust it enough to just let AI go. Where I get most excited, but where of course there's the most risk to the human race, is when we start turning AI loose on problems that are too hard for human beings. And this is where I think there's actually the greatest potential. Problems like climate change, problems like human health, problems like management and optimization of incredibly complicated systems like cities or the electrical grid or a data center. There's the opportunity here for AI to be really transformative, not just to make us more productive and efficient, but to actually solve problems that humans as a race cannot crack. But by the same token, because we can't solve them ourselves, it's a leap of faith to accept solutions that come from an AI. So I think that phase of AI's existence, I think will start in the next decade. I think has started. And seeing the solutions that come there is probably what has me most inspired by my job every day.
Great, thank you. And our final question, so the theme of today's conference is the future of computing. And as some of you may have realized, this resonates a lot with the recently announced Stephen A. Schwarzman College of Computing at MIT, which is a very big initiative. Jocelyn, I know you and your partner Mark have been very involved in this initiative at MIT. Which is intended to address the global opportunities and challenges presented by the prevalence of computing and the rise of artificial intelligence. Can you comment on the significance of this initiative and how you see its impacts on the larger innovation ecosystem?
Well, I think it's tremendous. I mean, I think MIT has made a huge splash, not just by raising so many resources, not just by committing to do so much primary research, not just by committing to be intersectional in exploring the ways in which computation and AI influence every other field of study. But where I think academia has an awful lot to offer, I won't say the most to offer, but I think that as engineers, we have some professional code of conduct that's usually about the quality of our work. Like if I'm a civil engineer, like I'm going to build a bridge that stands up, and if I'm an electrical engineer, like my circuits are going to work. And in computer science, actually, we're pretty sloppy. We accept that software is going to be buggy. I think that AI and data science need something like a Hippocratic oath. I think they need something like a practitioner's commitment to a moral or a legal code, a code of honor related to the work that we do, because there is so much opportunity, because AI is such a black box to most human beings, because there is so much opportunity to turn loose, to train a model on a biased data set and to revere something as supposedly objective that turns out itself to suffer from bias, because there's the opportunity to violate data privacy standards. And so I think regulation has a role to play, but I really don't expect I think that actually the most important thing is that we train a set of practitioners who are really aware of the consequences of their work on society and the world, and who aren't just sort of blindly plugging in numbers without thinking about what the data represent. And I think it's where we train those practitioners that we have the opportunity to open their minds to that impact, that societal context of their work. And so to me, the place for that kind of thinking to evolve, that academia is one of the right places to do that. And so, if not the most right place to do that. And so I hope that as the Schwarzman College embarks on discovery on primary research, but especially on the interdisciplinary connective tissue with all the other departments, including social sciences, humanities, and the arts, that it helps us, that it's a stepping stone towards evolving that kind of thinking. Because I think like we've gone too far to say, hey, I'm just the engineer, I'm just building the thing, somebody else decide how it's used. We're now, I think, making pretty profound decisions that will have pretty far reach on human civilization. I think MIT is in a great position to shape that future, and I'll feel a lot better. I feel a lot better knowing that institutions like MIT are taking up the challenge.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Jocelyn.
Oh, thank you.